of documentation to be followed for redevelopment. Before we start with the subject, those sitting here, or as DNA informs me, that there are about 300 societies who have registered this morning to participate into this 2-day seminar. I must share with you, don't think that these 300 societies are all that is going to be the number which is concerned with the subject that we are dealing this morning. If I may say so, around you when you look at, after 1960 or 1970, whatever buildings are constructed, they have reached the stage in their life for the purpose of redevelopment, or they are already in the process of being redeveloped at this point of time. The reason is, in a previous panel session that you heard, that the lifespan of a building is around 50 or 60 years, but experience shows that within 25 to 30 years, the building starts showing its age and requiring the redevelopment. Therefore, please kindly understand, even if you are staying in a building which looks very sound, very nice, and as we all say, this building was constructed in good old years when there was supposed to be better cement, better steel, and better craftsmanship, it will not last more than 30 years or 40 years in view of the weather, in view of the wind velocity, and in view of the changing environment and the various toxic situations which are around us in the city of Bombay. The industrialization, the wind which comes up from the sea, all this causes a multiple factor which ultimately results into requirement of a redevelopment of a property. Now when we are talking of redevelopment, I have been given around 30 minutes to make my presentation, and I want to deal with this subject in a way by which that at the end of this presentation, I want you to have a basic idea of what the redevelopment is, why it is required, how this has to be done. In a previous session, a gentleman sitting here said that this 70% does not apply to the society. Now let me demystify how it will apply to the society, why it will apply to the society, and how will you really go about when you are not a Mahada plot, and what will exactly happen with your rights, that also you need to know. So let me share with you my experiences. You may have individual questions, you may have individual factors and circumstances which may not match with what we are discussing this morning, but what is required is you should have a basic idea of how the redevelopment process takes place and how you are supposed to undertake that. Now, while we are starting with it, redevelopment came into focus because in the island city of Bombay, I believe there is more loud that I am becoming, more louder is the noise from outside. So I believe that you will have to cope up with both and try to discern what I am trying to say. The redevelopment came into focus by reason of the fact that more than 19,000 buildings in the island city between Colaba and Mahim were designated to be A-type, B-type and C-type buildings. Some constructed A-type prior to 1940, B-type between 40 and 50, and C-type after 1950 and 69, that these buildings were constructed. Larger lot of it, the 16,450 buildings of A-type, were considered to be dilapidated, requiring immediate attention, otherwise it would probably suffer through a accidental collapse and loss of life and property. For that, the Mahada was created, repair bond was created, repair cess was introduced, and redevelopment was thought about. Unfortunately, those buildings which were constructed prior to 1940 and classified as residential dilapidated buildings of A category of island city, they still require attention, but that is not coming forward because of the policy paralysis and because of the crisis which we have as to what law will be applicable. Either they are in heritage or they are in CRZ, or that there is supposed to be, they are so small in size that they cannot be redeveloped because of the open space regulations, or they can be developed but there is a requirement of fire safety measures, and the Supreme Court has recently decided on 17 December And ironically, even that judgment was supposed to be in a Kohinoor matter, in which that the division bench of the Supreme Court decided that you require a certain safety mechanism to be provided in all redevelopment, irrespective of how dilapidated the building is. All these policy problems are prohibitively restricting the redevelopment of these buildings, and as a result of which we have before us this morning the redevelopment of SAS buildings in Island City, one category. Redevelopment of buildings beyond Mahim and Sion, another category. Redevelopment of buildings constructed post 1960 but requiring a rejuvenation by demolition, reconstruction or redevelopment as the condition of the building may be, because they were constructed during several phases. We must understand, and I want to share with you this morning, that the development in this city and development in Maharashtra in particular did not take place in an organized manner. There was no organized effort which was made by anybody. The one which was done by housing authorities, that was suffering the most because of poor quality of construction, like the food available in the ration shop. The buildings constructed by the housing authorities were suffering from heavy quality deficiency. Those which were there in the private sector and they were constructed by private builders, they were all, I would say, in an unorganized sector, and they were not, in that sense of the word, any trained, certified, experience with background builders. They all came up as a matter of joining the industry. They started constructing and learning while working kind of situation, and those buildings therefore had their own problems of having either the RCC, structural stability issue, or the quality issue, or the kind of a lifespan that those buildings had, and as a result of which redevelopment of those buildings is a matter of utmost necessity which we have. With that backdrop, let us now go very quickly. These slides which are there, if you are unable to read them because of the size of the screen or size of the fonts, please ignore them, because I am going to summarize each slide by referring to you the relevant provisions which we are talking about. Before I start, I want to also share with you, for the purpose of enriching you with another important, I would say, development in the world. All of you are surely aware about Singapore. We all talk about making Mumbai Singapore, but how many of us really know that a very famous 2.2 kilometer road in Singapore called Orchard Road, which is supposed to be one of the most important commercial and entertainment hub in Singapore, the island, the city-state. It was looking like initially, before the beginning of the 1900s, it looked like one of the Thana streets. Between 1900 and 1950, it started looking like Kalbadevi and Princess Street. And very interestingly, there is a nearest station to Orchard Road today. If you go to Singapore, if you have been there and use the mass rapid transport or the train, the nearest station to Orchard Road is supposed to be Dhobi Ghat. There is a station called Dhobi Ghat from where you walk to the Orchard Road. This redevelopment took place only somewhere in the 70s in Singapore. They demolished all the old buildings and they reconstructed world's masterpiece, for which millions of passengers, millions of travelers come there, and they come on a destination for the purpose of making purchase, for the purpose of coming for entertainment, for the purpose of spending their holidays and spending their money. We aren't able to create this redevelopment. Why we are not able to do that also we will see this morning while we are looking at the redevelopment of our subject as well as the documentation required. Let's start and get into the subject. As I was talking about, the island city of Bombay has more than 17,388 acres of land, running into 2 crores and odd square meters of land between Colaba in the south and Mahim and Sion in the north. And on the either side, there is supposed to be the coastline which you are facing. I already referred to you about the buildings constructed prior to 1940 and up to 1969, how they are categorized A type, B type and C type, and how they are allowed to be redeveloped. Now, what exactly are the laws relating to this redevelopment? Let's try to look at them so we are familiarized with it, and there is nothing foreign, there is no foreign animal that you are looking at while you discuss the matter. We have DC Regulation 33(5), which refers to the redevelopment of housing schemes in the MHADA property for the economically weaker section, low income group, and for the medium income group, the development. DC Regulation 33(7), which refers to a reconstruction of cess building in Island City by cooperative societies and belonging to corporation or police authorities. Then DC Regulation 33(9), which refers to redevelopment of cess buildings under urban renewal scheme. This is the most popular, by which the small properties which are adjoining to each other could be converted into a cluster development. So 3, 4 or 5 properties could be put together, and the urban renewal scheme that you can redevelop and make unviable property viable, in which that you not only rehabilitate the original occupant, but you also get the pre-sale component area, and that becomes an incentive for a developer to step in and construct. We must understand that we have got one of the most novel schemes, which probably in Asia, the other countries are duplicating today. Our government realized, and Maharashtra government realized much earlier in the day, in 70s, that first of all, they have no wherewithal, they had no network, they had no resources to do the housing schemes and develop and increase the housing stock. As a result of which, the thought arose that why not to involve a private sector. This PPP, public-private partnership, was a principle by which that it went about. And they decided that why not to involve private sector into this by giving them some incentive to work, and instead of government providing all this, let them undertake the redevelopment, let them be benefited, because without an incentive, without any return, it will not be possible to involve the private sector, because profit may be a bad word from a political platform, but in commercial parlance, you can't have anything unless that you do something in return, because paying something to a man who is delivering is a necessity, is a condition precedent before he can be involved into the redevelopment procedure. That's how this entire slum redevelopment, that's how incentive FSI, that's how MHADA Act proposals, that's how this entire schemes of redevelopment have been evolved, and around which that the redevelopment history of last 20 years is built. Then we have 33(9), as I said. 33(10), when the World Bank came for the purpose of giving us some finance and some amount, they said that we don't want people on the road and footpath who have made their life to be pushed out without any rehabilitation. So it compelled the government to provide for them something, as a result of which 33(10) was amended and brought about by the government, that even a footpath can be considered to be a slum, and they will have to be provided rehabilitation. Those who develop this particular slum, they will be given an incentive FSI. That's the 33(10). So this is what the present DC regulations are on the subject. Then we have got a DCR 67, which is applicable, as I was talking a few minutes ago, about the heritage buildings. If you really maintain heritage building, you can also get an FSI incentive for that, because you are not able to redevelop the property. Government wants you to keep your property as it is. Then municipal leasehold lands have a policy resolution 796, which also concerns redevelopment, because it says that if you are redeveloping the municipal property, then how really those plots will be allotted, what compensation you will pay to the municipality. Maharashtra Slum Area Act 1971, originally there was a thought in our political, I would say, system, that we wanted to maintain slum and merely improve their hygienic conditions. That was the Slum Act 71 for. From 71 we moved further. Then we started saying why not to really improve the slum. So from maintaining the slum and making it hygienic condition, it went to why not to improve the conditions and improve the slum. Then we came to third and the last stage, why not to demolish, reconstruct and redevelop the slums. That's how slum redevelopment authorities and their powers have taken place, and amendments after 85 and 89 have taken place in a slum act. So this act also becomes equally relevant law for you to understand. Maharashtra Housing and Area Development Act 1976 is a very important piece of legislation. All of us who are more than 60 years old are aware about the Mumbai Repair Board or Bombay Repair and Reconstruction Board, which as it was known after 1960. That was the board which looked after repair and reconstruction of the old buildings which were there. No major work was done except repair cess was really collected, and in a given isolated cases of dangerous structures that the repair board stepped in. Otherwise it had no fund, it had no wherewithal to do anything. Ultimately in 76 the Maharashtra Housing and Area Development Act came picture, and in that two important provisions came about. How to really redevelop the property, how ultimately certain properties even government could acquire, and it introduced a provision that if there is a tenanted building, for example, if there is a tenanted building in, for example, in Matunga, and in that 70% of the people decide, and that is supposed to be residential, it is paying repair cess, and it is supposed to be a building which has got all tenanted areas, then 70% or more tenants, if they come together, give a notice to the landlord and say that we want to buy compulsorily your property, then in that event, government will step in, and under section 103B of the MHADA Act, that such a building will have to be sold by the owner to the tenant, who will ultimately form the society. When they form society, MHADA provides for them a higher FSI, which becomes an incentive FSI for reaccommodating those tenants also, as well as any builder who steps in. This was the scheme by which that the MHADA Act was amended. So this is an important legislation which you should know about. Then we come to chapter 8, which I just now talked about, 103B, for the proposed cooperative societies, occupiers with 70% occupying, coming together to buy. Then what affects the redevelopment today, even today it is, the 6 November 2011 new CRZ notification has come. Mumbai is very, very peculiar. Its history is involved with port. It developed because of the port. And now after our becoming very environment conscious, that because of the CRZ notification, these coastal boundaries are creating problems for the redevelopment, because it requires a CRZ clearances for redevelopment of either slums or properties, because on both sides of the city that you are flanked by the sea, and as a result of which CRZ comes into picture. Then of course we have got Maharashtra Cooperative Societies Act, and we have got a Maharashtra Ownership Flags Act, and incidentally this act is going to, any minute there will be a notification by which Maharashtra Ownership Flag Act will be replaced by Maharashtra Housing Regulation and Development Act 2012. The President has given his assent. It is only waiting for the rules to come in and the government to notify the day on which it comes into play. So that will be the time at which Ownership Flag Act or MOFA will be replaced by the new law. Now we come to very quickly redevelopment of building of cooperative housing societies. How do we go about? There is a 79A section of the Cooperative Societies Act. Now, because the gentleman sitting here referred to that, so this becomes very relevant and we must understand. The cooperative society authorities received various complaints of malpractices, managing committee hijacking the society, some power groups in the society trying to misguide the members and trying to have for their own cronies or their friends and associates a better benefit from a builder, and I would say suppression of minority of the society members. As a result of which the government looked into the matter and introduced this particular guideline, which guidelines are of binding nature. Now let us try to go into this case little more in depth. 79A provides that after January 2009, if a society wants to redevelop, what should be done? I am giving you first in some sort of a gist of the whole matter. It says that more than 1/4 of the members should really bring about a resolution that they want to redevelop. Then the whole process starts. When the process starts, then you must appoint an architect, you must appoint consultant, you must take report, You must prepare some sort of a tender condition. You must ask for offers. You must obtain competitive bid. You must select that. You must bring it to the general body. You must pass a resolution and get this particular tender approved. Then you must have a contract which is also considered by the members in the general body. The first meeting which you take place of approval of this, that should be videographed. You must call a member from the office of the joint registrar. He must be member. He must be present that day. He must watch the proceeding. Attendance must be recorded. Agreement must be approved in this body. Thereafter that there should be signature which is authorized to be done. Thereafter any amendment to be considered. With a developer, when you enter into agreement, you must provide for that 20% of the amount of the construction cost. He gives a bank guarantee. There must be provision how dispute will be resolved. And every member must be reaccommodated and he must be rehabilitated. These are the provisions of 79. If you read it, and if you read it, it is said about Winston Churchill, the wartime Prime Minister of United Kingdom, that if you give Churchill a telephone directory, he can read in a manner by which that you will laugh, laugh and laugh. It is also said that Winston Churchill had an ability that he will read the telephone directory in a manner whereby you will start crying because you can instill that kind of tragedy in your mind by merely reading the names. So some people have an ability, if they read 79A, they will say this is an impossible manifesto. Society can never appoint a developer. Society can never go into redevelopment. These are handicap after handicap after handicap which have been introduced by the government, and as a result of which it makes impossible for the cooperative society to go into redevelopment. But there are people who can read this 79A and find that it can be reasonably construed. It is a great safeguard and it is preventing any malpractice in the society, and it is going to be helpful for the purpose of redevelopment. And lots of disputes which are unnecessary cropping up can be reduced. Now the most important part, which is supposed to be my gift of the day to you, which you must carry this morning. Is it so that 79A is a compulsory which must be followed, and without following no contract, no society can form? This will become one of the questions this morning any which way, if we will have a time to discuss. Answer. Our court has held, Bombay High Court. For example, there are 12 members in a society. 10 or 11 members are in majority to go ahead with this. One member is not certain or not available to say whether he is agreeing, he is not agreeing. Privately, everybody sat and they decided that they should engage Mr. Mohammed Irani as a developer. They have agreed to the terms, they have agreed everything. Now, if this procedure has to be followed, it will take between 1 month to 2 months or 3 months. And all these formalities will take time. Now, out of 12 members, if 11 decide that 1 or 2 members are not available or they are disagreeing, are we compelled to go for 79A? Bombay High Court says, this is merely for the purpose of guiding the society, and in the event of there being a requirement of a debate in democratic way, then you require 79A to be followed. In a case like this where there are 12 people out of which 10 or 11 have agreed, then this is okay. It doesn't mean that this becomes a non-performing of a mandatory provision, therefore illegal. You need not worry. You can go ahead without 79A also. Many find that how can you decide like that? This is introduced, now you say it is not necessary. But there is also a lot of substance in what Bombay High Court says. If 95, 97, 98% of people are agreeable, then this 2% or 3% scenario should not come in your way and hold you back, is the principle. This slide, which you must have by now read, it talks about the direct to policy given by directions given by the government under 79A, how society should follow. Then this is further elaborated, how the demand must come, how special general body meeting must come, how minutes of the meeting to all members must be given, how to obtain tenders, how agreement to be executed with the developer, and developer to give 20% bank guarantee, available alternate residential premises to members to be provided, agreement to be registered, development right non-transferable. Why? Because if you appointed a person to develop, He can't transfer to somebody and go away because the whole process of screening him, selecting him, has gone through this entire democratic process. And one fine day after signing, he says, I will not do it. Now we will do it and I am walking out. That is not the way. In government contracts, it always happens that qualifying person for taking an award of the contract is some powerful person. He takes his fee, walks out and gives away to other consortium members. And this has been looked down upon by the courts. And here this policy provides that you can't really assign. Then comes dispute resolution under 91 of the Cooperative Societies Act. Allotment of tenement you will be doing by lottery system when there will be further construction and the permanent alternate accommodation when you provide. Now this is 79A provision which you must also bear in mind. Let me answer what our learned friend here, our invited today spoke about. He says in a case of MHADA this 70% applies. My purpose of telling this is that probably there will be a different impression you will carry with what he said. The first and foremost principle is that society works on the principle of democracy, 51 versus 49. Now the question arises is, what the courts have held is that if the majority of the society has agreed to do it, not one, there are 6 decisions between 2013 and 14 which Bombay High Court has given, that if the majority decision is there, because the Supreme Court had decided way back in the 60s, in Daman Singh's case, that when you become a member of a society, you don't have an individual will. You may have an individual right, but you don't become me versus society situation, because you have surrendered your right to become member of that society and you have submitted yourself to the collective will of the people. Tomorrow if the new government is elected, you may have voted for a person who has not come into power. Can you say this government I don't really agree to? That only some special political group can say, who are called Marxist-Leninists. They say we don't believe in this system at all. But if you are part of the democratic process, you must accept what the majority decides. This is what the courts have upheld and said, that when the majority has decided, the minority cannot come in its way, and it has been upheld all throughout, and that is the principle by which your redevelopment will ultimately be decided. Now comes modification of the DC regulations, which modifications we talked about. And as I believe that Mr. Subodh Kumar is not here in the room, I can praise him in his absence, because Khalil Gibran said, don't express love and praise to person to whom you want to express. You should do it in his absence, if possible, before the walls and the mirror, but don't convey to them because it will have adverse effect on such persons. Subodh Kumarji was responsible to bring about these changes. He brought about, he streamlined the entire DC regulations and defining FSI, defining what will be the extra FSI available, which he coined the expression fungible FSI he brought about. It was because of that the builders talking to you about the flower bed, about niche, about wardrobe, about drying area, about various other after OC to be covered areas, and all those imaginary built-up areas which were in the market have come to a close after 2012, because everything that is within the building line is of FSI and not free of FSI. You need to pay for it. And he said that you want extra FSI, no? Take 30% in the case of residential. Pay 60% of the ready reckoner value for that. Take it, use it. There are no voids, there are no passages, there are no flower beds, there is nothing. Anything you want to do, make it into FSI. And if you don't have FSI, take it up to 30% more, and corporation will give you right. Here corporation gets the benefit of the revenue, the builder gets the area, the purchase, and there was so much fear expressed. And in fact, we were all thinking, even I was thinking, that there will not be fancy building, there will not be aesthetics, there will not be beautiful buildings coming up. And people say that it will be Chinese houses, it will become Wimco matchboxes, because now there will be no play. There can't be cantilever balconies, there will not be flower beds, there will not be, flowers coming out of the balconies, all is gone because there is supposed to be, everything is prohibited. Now you have FSI and Sanjeev FSI and nothing else. But time has proved that what he did by following the Chennai model has brought a lot of streamlining. No builder can come and tell you today, मैं करा लूंगा. No builder can come and tell you today, मैं दे दूंगा. और अपना होता है, अपना बनता है, मैं करा के लाऊंगा. He cannot do that because कुछ करा नहीं सकता. Because this is only within this rule or not within the rule. And then if you still believe such a fly-by-night operator, a good builder, a reputed builder, a person with a background, he will never tell you this. He will say, भैया ये सब बातें छोड़ो, nobody can give you anything more. This is how it is. Examine it. Mr. Subodh Kumar was very humble. He didn't say. But the question is, somebody talked about corruption and all that. He brought about a lot of downfall of corruption. Corruption, like cockroach, cannot go away. This is from biblical time. So it will not go away. Cockroach hasn't died. Corruption will not go. It can be minimized, it can be controlled, it can be restricted, it can be put under the carpet. But fungible FSI has created that job, that role, that performance, and that is where we are. So modification of DC regulation will be dealt with by some good architect friend. I need not go into that. Then we come to this, we can skip. The 35.3 provides for what shall be counted in FSI. This is what we were talking about. This fire escape balcony, pocket covered terraces shall be counted in FSI. All that part has come. Ornamental projections, voids, flower beds, and ornamental projects like flower bed, balcony, gallery, deck parking. All this has been covered now. Now we come into, let's skip from here straight away and go to the documents to be executed, which is my subject. And which subject I want to share with you. And let me tell you, I have spent more than 3.5 decades in the industry. I have advised builders by and large. I have also acted for societies. And I must also tell you, with lot of dreams and lot of ideas and lot of telephone calls and the relatives telling you that you go to the lawyer's office for the purpose of EAB